Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, thank you. My name is 𝗖𝗕𝗢 𝗖𝗵𝗡 on behalf of UBS Forum, along with our presenting partner, IBM, 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗏 𝗖𝗵𝗄𝗃 𝗖𝗵𝗲 and Added Software. I welcome you all for our exclusive conference and 4th edition of CIO Conclave Awards. We did our first 2 editions virtually, then once things opened up, then we did it in Mumbai, now we are in Bangalore. Then the 2nd edition for sure will happen in Mumbai. But first we start, I would like to thank all of you for sparing your time and joining us this morning for such a wonderful event. Okay, now giving you a brief background about today's event. As you all know, with the advancement in technologies, digital transformation, AI, analytics, ML and more, it has never been a better chance for CIOs to play that central role for driving business growth and value. In today's competitive marketplace, business transformation is a requirement, not an option. As companies look ahead to a post-pandemic era today, for an organization to transform the business, they need to formulate strategy which will in return promote agile practices, bolster technology talent, manage a portfolio of initiative and deliver ROI. In today's conference, we are bringing together top remarkable CIOs who will equip you with the best strategies to be used to drive business value and create competitive advantage through this used case studies, stories, and expert views. And to set the tone, I would like to invite our keynote speaker for the day, and Satish Panchapakesan, who is the Senior Vice President and CIO with 𝗕𝗵𝗡 Limited. To give you a background, he is an industry leader with more than 25 years in retail and consumer product. He is experienced in blend of providing leadership in technology function in end user enterprises, as well as being a thought leader in consulting firms and service delivery. Satish has managed multi-million-dollar P&L in consulting globally across a spectrum of digital transformation services. In widely traveled and a continuous learner, he is a member of NASSCOM Special Interest Group on Web3 technologies. Can we welcome Satish with a big round of applause, please?
Good morning, everyone, and it's back to work after Diwali, so I think it's always a good icebreaker to have a conference like this and then get into some serious business as we get to say end of Q3 or Q4, depending on which part of the global and firms that we belong to. But nevertheless, thanks UBS for having me as a keynote speaker, and thanks all the my esteemed colleagues from the industry for having been part of this session. So what I'll do is I'll spend the next 15-20 minutes in a bit of a conversation with you as far as possible, and though it's a keynote address, probably we'll make it more like a dialogue rather than a monologue. And I think to set the context, if you look at the way the CIO is viewed today, or the Chief Information and Digital Officer, as things have panned out over a period of time, I think we've come a long, long way, and I'm sure each one of us in this room would actually agree. So the objective of this address is to actually kind of expound that a little bit, and then try to understand what are the elements which actually make this journey so far that interesting, and what really could potentially kind of hold out going forward in the next decade or so, which is really seen as a tech decade or a decade, as they call it. And I think that's really the great opportunity for each one of us as professionals to kind of do what we can do in its most I would say flagrant colors, right? So if I put it that way. So just to kind of set the context, I think all of us would agree that during these last couple of years, right, especially let's take a perspective from pandemic, because that was really the tipping point from a technology leader's role perspective, and the amount of and I think every technology leader was really in the eye of the storm. It doesn't matter which industry you belong to, whether you were in manufacturing or in retail or in healthcare or banking or anywhere else, I think the technology leader was really the eye of the storm, and it was an absolute necessity for that role to be at the eye of the storm because of what we are going through, right? And we could have had several versions of, work from home, work from office, hybrid model, so on and so forth. But I think putting it all together, connecting the people and connecting the vital resources across the organization for really keeping the the lamp burning during these pandemic years was really the I would say the high point of every technology leader's achievement, I would say, to a great extent. I think all of us, for whatever we have done, we really owe ourselves a big applause. So I think we should just start ourselves with a little bit of a self-congratulation. So thank you, and I think this is just the beginning of what beholds us, right? I think having said that, there are probably 3 or 4 or 5 themes which stand out, during this time, right? As a result of what organizations have seen out of the technology leaders. Traditionally, if you've seen that, technology was always, if I go back into my career, right, late 90s, mid to late 90s, it was technology was always seen as a necessary evil, right? And how do we contain cost, and how do we somehow get things done, and push the the vendors, the partners hard to do something at absolutely zero cost and still get something out of it. And if you don't get it, it's fine. If you get it, it's really good, kind of a mindset, right? A very cost-driven, a very opportunistic kind of a mindset. That's probably, I'm assuming most of us have kind of started our career with that kind of a outlook towards technology. And of course, there are definitely some outliers, but by and large, if you take the average of what technology was perceived as a critical differentiator to any market or industry, I think that's probably kind of summarizes it. I think then we had the internet age, the 2000s and beyond, where people definitely started seeing a lot of value out of what a technology leader should actually bring in, and what technology can actually bring in value in terms of connecting people, connecting processes, and and then we had the next elevation to the internet age in terms of the Apple age or the Web 2.0 age, where things got a little more interesting, right, from a value perspective. And then we had whole burst of cloud and whole burst of social and whole burst of mobility and all of that, probably over the last decade or so, where we're really seen as innovators, right? We were seen as people who can actually do new stuff, which has never been done, or which were never thought out by the leaders in the industry as could be done, right? And I think the art of the possible really got pushed, and all of us were party to some of those offerings that we could actually take to our respective businesses. And broadly, innovation could have been, some of them could have been frugal, some of them could have been quantum, and I think we are all, I don't need to give examples, we all are surrounded by examples in literally every industry, every touch point in our lives that we have. And then now, if you look at, typically over, I would not say pandemic, but even probably a little ahead of pandemic and during the pandemic days, definitely for sure, technology is really seen as a strategic influence, right? It's no longer, it's definitely innovation for sure, but it's about innovation that can actually be not just game changing, but it can actually be industry changing, it can be market changing, it can change the customer influence on the way they look at the products, and so on and so forth, right? And we're seeing a whole burst of it happening, through Web3 and Meta and stuff like that. And I think this is really the cusp of probably another S-curve that we're going to shift ourselves into over the next, tech decade, as we call it. And Gartner puts it that, at least about 60% of, Facebook users would actually be having a kind of a meta avatar, right? Or rather, it's 85% of Facebook users would actually having a meta avatar, and about 60% of users in the industry would actually have a touch point on the meta, right, in some form or shape, right? So that's the power of not just innovation, but the game-changing strategic nature of influence that we can have as a touch point to our users and our businesses that we serve. And most importantly, I think some of these things, whether it's cloud or whether it's mobility, while the innovations were on, it was always, paced by the business to a great extent, right? And while the innovation was ambitious and aspirational in many cases, I think the role of an IT officer was always, to still ask for a budget, right? Still ask for something, and be in a bit of a defensive play, bit of a, I would say, a quasi-order-taking kind of an approach, right? I'm not saying in general, but I'm just saying on an average, that's what it would be. There would definitely be extremes on both ends. But the reality is, everything that we thought in terms of transformations actually got done in these 2 years, right? And it got done per force, right? I think people had no option. Many businesses which had to, which were very comfortable in a brick and mortar type of a setup, many businesses which absolutely insisted that people should be under a roof to get the job done, actually got connected, and they all got connected very seamlessly. And definitely the CIO was central to all these changes, that could actually be scaled up in an order of magnitude that we never did over the last 10 years, right? So everything really happened in the last 1.5 to 2 years. So that's been what really got done in a couple of years, what we could have done much faster, over the last decade or so. And needless to say, I'm sure each one of you will agree, we went through an extreme phase of ambiguity, right? We didn't know how our next, sales month would look like, especially businesses like where I come from, which is a discretionary apparel fashion retail. The malls were closed, right? And the lockdowns were on and so on and so forth. So the level of ambiguity in terms of just sheer continuity of the business on a day-to-day basis was a big question. And I think that was a big headwind on the face of the technology leader, and pretty much I think we all kind of stood up to it to a great extent, right? As a result of all this, the technology leader is no longer a bystander, where you're taking orders or you're taking inputs or you're being in the more of the influence stage, but you are actually driving things at the center, right? With the board listening to you, right? With everybody starting from the CEO and the rest of the board, having a conversation, taking your counsel in terms of, if this is what the business direction is, what are the 2-3 options the technology can actually bring us and take us to the next level in the most agile and in the most secure and in the most, in the best of the quality, right? So these were questions which, I'm sure all of us were answering as we were going through the process over the last couple of years. And I think while we say all of this, fundamental to it is culture, right? Because it's no longer about driving technology the way it was. It's no longer about just taking orders. It's no longer about just being an influence, but it's about influencing your colleagues and their teams to do things in a particular way, which probably could have been uncomfortable to some people, but again, that was a requirement of the time. And I think what we've essentially done is driven the culture to actually move where we embrace technology in a more proactive way, rather than it being, something that you need to live with, right? So that's a quick context in terms of, why the CIO was really in the eye of the storm the last couple of 3 years, and then, how do we really take it forward from here is what I'll focus on in the next few slides. So I think blazing the new trail, as one would call it, right? So it's so there is a new path of course that has been kind of set out based on the and we've kind of set expectations very, very high to the businesses. I'm sure all of you will agree to that. And now it's about living and exceeding to that expectations, and also taking it to the next level of inflection, right? So I think the first thing is, I believe very strongly that we need to be aware, and we need to be awake to the fact that we are at a strategic perch, right? From an organization perspective, there is a very, very profound understanding of various functions and how they work, and what are some of the limitations that can be, challenges that can be addressed through technology, what are the opportunities available there. I don't think we've had that kind of a ringside view of an organization on an average again over many, many years, and this 2-3 years have really given us that impact. And what it eventually means is you can have a direct influence on a customer experience, who's going to bring the money to the company. Right? We're not going to, get into a new, avatar of an ROI, right? It's not about why cloud is effective. It's not about why a certain investment on, automation has to be done. It's about what new capability it actually gives you as an organization to take it to the next level, and how did that capability actually take you to this point where you are today, and what's it that's, what is the next step in that? I think that's the conversation I'm sure that most of us are having with our leaders within the organization. And most importantly, I think it's also time to visualize the role as with a mindset of revenue, right? It's not just a mindset of cost, or a mindset of cost containment, or a mindset of cost avoidance, elimination, or even a mindset of innovation, right? Of course, that's important, but it's about how do I monetize my assets that I've created, right? Because we are creating a lot of data, with whatever we have put, be it IoT, smart devices, be it any of the reports that get generated through our point of sale, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of data that's getting generated, much more than what we ever thought. And then most importantly, the data is getting kind of integrated across multiple variables, right? Like you have today, for instance, where I come from, I almost get a single pane view of what's happening in Reliance Trends with respect to my products, what's happening in Shoppers Stop with respect to my products. It's a single pane view, right? So how do I actually, I'm not saying I want to monetize that. Of course, I will monetize that for my organization, but there is a lot of third-party monetization that can be done just out of, taking that to the next level in terms of, A, creating value for your own organization, B, creating value for your partners who work with you, and C, creating value for the customers who might actually be extremely benefited with the data. So that's the power of integration, and hence the data monetization capabilities that really stand out as one of the 3 trailblazers in my view. So that's a quick perspective on what next. Now, having said all this, there is also a this is courtesy Forbes insights, where there is a clear view that all that we are seeing and all that we are experiencing in our current roles is actually substantiated by analysts and industry at a wider level, based on surveys that these organizations conduct across Forbes 250, 20 these companies. So 49% of the CIOs apparently is expected that by 2025 would most likely take up the role of a CEO, right? Now the point is not to make our bosses insecure, but I think it's a great opportunity for all of us as professionals to serve the industry in a very, very differentiated way. That's the way I look at it. And the fact of the matter is, over the last 6 to 7 years, I don't want to take names, there are at least 4 or 5 instances globally, big names, where CIOs have actually become the CEOs of their businesses. And, most of them are probably in pharma and healthcare, where there is a lot of grounded understanding of technology, and implication of technology is far more, and hence their ability to run the organization in that in a CEO role is actually more effective. And many of it is contextual as to why a CIO could have become a CEO, but it's never been a trend, right? It's been anecdote so far, but now the prediction is that it's going to be a trend. CIOs are still, by and large, in many organizations, do not have a board level representation. You have a CFO, you have a general counsel, you will have a chief supply chain officer, chief marketing officer, chairman of the board, CEO, so on and so forth. But a CIO has been always at best part of certain audit committees on information security or certain, just to give a view on what technology view is. It's been very, very kind of, just pull him across for a meeting or two, and audit probably was the most formal one that most of us would have actually experienced. But prediction is 2025, close to 60% of the CIOs would actually have a formal role on the board, right, with a formal charter, and that charter would actually be driving the strategy of the organization, be it finance, be it supply chain, be it marketing, and be it the company's overall customer strategy, right? So that's what we're talking about. Talking about revenue streams which the CIOs can own, I think there is a number of about 64% or so where all the data that gets generated out of ML, AI, IoT, smart devices, integrations that you actually do with your partners, with your suppliers, monetization of all of them could actually be a distinct revenue stream, right? And you could actually own up that revenue for your organization and kind of set it off against the cost of doing technology innovations, or just simply add it to your top line, right? I think the choice is left. So I think that's the opportunity that we're seeing. 89% of CIOs are going to have a direct. So the earlier point was about creating a revenue stream out of the data and the integrations and the opportunities that arise as a result of running your IT operations. But the next point is 89% of the CIOs will be having a direct revenue generating responsibility, which means they will be a charter on their roles that you need to get X amount of dollar revenue into the top line of the organization, so that you can actually take everything that you're doing in terms of investments or strengthening the strategy of the organization in terms of how you execute some of the projects in a more distinct way, right? So that's what the Forbes predictions is. So having said all that, I think essentially we are talking about a significant transformation at a very personal level also, right? Because we all there is a little bit of awareness first, and then we need to start kind of understanding what it means and what it means in terms of where we are today, and how we really need to morph into a role which will make us more efficient and more to the aspirations that kind of talk through these points. So I think first and foremost, it's going to be a transition from a tech CIO, because given where we are today, we have an extremely grounded understanding of the how of the organization, right? I think the why and the what is something which generally all of us are very comfortable at a certain level within the organization. And sometimes it is the execution that most of the times, right? I think execution will have strategy for lunch, or whoever said that, right? 𝗕𝗓𝗄𝗎 term. So if you don't do that, a culture will have strategy for lunch. But again, I'm just putting it as execution can also have strategy for lunch if you don't do it right. So I think the grounded understanding of how things will happen. Do you have another minute? Yeah. The grounded understanding of how things can happen is actually going to transition our roles from a technical leader to a business leader, and more focused on the hows of the business outcomes rather than the why and the what, right? I think by and large, the technology function has been an enabling organization, right? I think it has to go beyond enabling to a motivating organization where we're kind of driving the change, we're driving the culture, and of course we're driving it with a lot of humility, right? I think that's the key thing. CIOs have always been credited with being excellent people who provide inputs, right? Who create an influence. But now it's about moving away from the navigator to being the driver, right? Because that's what is going to really do it. And when you're a driver, obviously we need to be far more secure, right? Because it's very easy to navigate sometimes, backseat driving as one would call it. But if you are on the holding the wheels, then I think there is a lot more aspects that one needs to consider, and these are some of the traits, starting from And I said be secure because it's probably the most fundamental to compliance and the way the organization is run. It starts with that, but then the journey is far more beyond that. I think most importantly, and I think this is something which all of us will actually vouch as CIOs and leaders, is that continuous learning will never change, right? Because we are going to have a technology which is going to be, following the quadrupling the efficiency of your compute, of what we can store. Literally over the next two years, things are going to multiply, and the whole surge of 5G and the entire technology wave that we will see during the next decade means that a lot of what we know in terms of our ERPs or our existing knowledge around data warehouses and so on and so forth would actually go through a continuous evolution. And I think learning is going to be very fundamental to all of that, and that's something which will never change as we wear the new stripes. Right? I think with that said, I will stop, and if there are any comments, questions, happy to take it, either over here or offline.
Thank you, sir, for your time and presentation. Can we have a big round of applause? And sir, please stay back. We will take one or two quick questions if people have. Do you have one or two quick questions for sir? Yes, sir. Can you please? Okay. There.
Hello, sir. It's not a question. Just want to understand how we are taking the lines towards the social e-commerce. Social e-commerce in the sense, like now everything is changing from the convolution e-commerce to social e-commerce. So want to listen 2 points from you, how you are taking forward in your organization.
Sorry, I didn't get the question. How we are converting to social?
How we are leading towards the social e-commerce platform.
Social e-commerce platforms, okay. See, it's a, I think we are all doing social e-commerce, to a great extent, because we order our foods through Swiggies and Zomatos, and we do a lot of trading through OLXs, and it's already at a particular level of the industry it is on. But I think the whole e-commerce has evolved in 3 phases, right? So we had early 2010s, it was multi-channel, right, where you could do the same thing with a different experience, but just that the channel will change, right? And then you had omni-channel, where we said, we'll keep the experience same, right? I think social is about keeping the experience same, but having more people into, into the mix. And it will probably blend very seamlessly, right? I mean, I can probably give 1 or 2 examples. They are not very Indian though. If you look at a company called Shein, right? It's a clothing company in China. They use social commerce very effectively. What they do is, they actually take the fashion designs from TikTok videos and Insta feeds of, heavy influencers, and actually convert those designs into actual, fabric and garments in as less as 10 days, 12 days, and they actually sell it as a limited edition at a very high profit, right? And then if that takes off well, they actually do more of that. So I'm sure every industry, I'm speaking to my industry. And this is one example in my industry where social commerce has really changed. Even companies like Zara and Mango, who are into ultra fast fashion, they have been shaken by what Shein has been able to do, and they did this even before COVID. Not just people watch TikTok during COVID, but even before COVID they were doing it. So I'm sure every industry will have its own context in terms of how, but definitely a point to watch out, and along with Meta and Web3 technologies, I think the possibilities are limitless.
Yeah. Take one more, sir. One more.
Sure.
For you.
I'm Guru from ANZ. So in terms of, looking back into the organizations which have done, heavy investment in the past for the legacy, right? So how does the CIO is going to convince the rest of the guys to, do this continuous investment? And the moment we reach 5 steps, this technology is already 10 steps ahead. So that has become always a, challenge for us to keep convincing them. So do you have any insights into that?
No, it's a very valid point. Obviously, while we want to do certain things different, I think we also have to change the way in which we we buy and we procure and we invest into our technologies. That's very basic to it. Otherwise, you cannot keep changing things, in the way we've done so far. So my only 2 cents is, I think with a lot of products and services and platforms getting commoditized, right? It's about how do you justify the usage vis-a-vis the cost, right? It's no longer buying an SAP license and sitting on it with about 100 odd modules, probably 20 of them getting used, and that too with some 50 odd customizations. It's no longer that kind. I think that is a slippery slope which we've all been through, and I think we've burnt our fingers on that, right? It's given us some great lessons. That's a good part of it. So now it's about horses for courses, right? What you need is what you buy, and what you use is what you pay for. And I think most of the software evolution also is happening in that direction, right?
Okay, thank you, sir.